Title: The Thunderous Mountain and the Hidden Temple. High upon the steep, jagged peaks of the thunderous mountain, a fierce storm raged, its clouds swirling in chaotic spirals above the world. The wind howled like 1,000 voices crying in unison, and flashes of lightning cut through the darkness, illuminating the rugged landscape in eerie, fleeting moments. The mountain was no ordinary place. It was said to be the home of ancient secrets, hidden from the eyes of the world for centuries. Legend told of a temple, buried deep within the mountain's heart, a sacred place of power and mystery. Few had dared to seek it, and fewer still had returned. Many believed the storm that perpetually shrouded the summit was a warning, a guardian to keep the curious away. Yet, there were those who could not resist the call. They believed that within the temple's stone walls lay a secret so powerful that it could change the course of history. Among these seekers was a young adventurer named Amen. With a heart full of courage and a mind brimming with dreams of discovery, Amen had journeyed for days, navigating the treacherous paths that led toward the storm-wreathed peak. His companions had long since turned back, fearful of the growing storm. But Amen pressed on, knowing that the answers he sought lay just beyond the horizon of danger. His footsteps were muffled by the thick mist that enveloped the mountain, the air charged with the scent of ozone and earth. As he climbed higher, the storm seemed to grow more intense, the very sky seeming to rebel against his presence. Thunder cracked overhead, and the ground trembled beneath his feet. But Amen did not falter. He had come too far to turn back now. Somewhere within this tempest, the temple waits, he muttered to himself, his voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. I must find it. As the minutes stretched into hours, Amen found himself at the base of the mountain's summit, where the storm seemed to converge. It was here that the winds howled the loudest, and the air crackled with raw energy. He could feel the power of the mountain, ancient and untamed, pulsating around him. A faint glow appeared through the mist, like a beacon beckoning him forward. Amen's heart quickened as he stepped closer. Was it the temple? Had he finally found the path? Suddenly, a bolt of lightning struck the mountain's peak with a deafening crash. The ground beneath Amen's feet gave way, and he tumbled into the darkness below. When Amen awoke, he was no longer on the mountain's surface. He found himself lying on cool, smooth stone, surrounded by an eerie silence. The storm's fury had vanished, replaced by a heavy stillness that pressed in from all sides. Slowly, he rose to his feet, his eyes adjusting to the dim light that filled the vast cavern. He was in a massive underground hall, the walls of which were covered in intricate carvings and symbols he could not understand. The air was thick with the scent of ancient dust, and the faintest hum of magic seemed to reverberate through the very stone. Before him stood an enormous doorway, flanked by two towering statues of forgotten gods. Their eyes seemed to follow him as he approached, their faces carved in stoic expressions, their hands outstretched as if offering a silent greeting. The temple was alive with history, its secrets waiting to be uncovered. Amen's heart raced. This was it, the hidden temple. He had found it. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, pushing open the heavy stone doors. The air inside was cool and musty, the faint scent of incense lingering in the darkened halls. The walls were adorned with murals, depicting scenes of ancient rituals and celestial beings, their forms glowing with an ethereal light. The deeper Amen ventured into the temple, the more the feeling of power grew, like an unseen force watching his every move. After what felt like hours of wandering through twisting corridors and labyrinthine passages, Amen arrived at a large chamber. At the center of the room was a pedestal, upon which rested an ornate, golden chest. The chest was covered in intricate runes, and it glowed with an otherworldly light. The legend spoke of this chest, of its contents that were said to hold the very essence of the gods themselves. To open it was to unleash untold power, but also to risk everything. Aemon hesitated. The storm had brought him to this moment, but would he be able to bear the weight of what lay within? With trembling hands, he reached for the chest, his heart pounding in his chest. As his fingers brushed against the cold metal, a surge of energy rippled through him, and the chest slowly began to open. As the chest creaked open, a blinding light poured from within, filling the chamber with a brilliance that seemed to consume everything. Aemon stepped back, shielding his eyes from the intensity. The light subsided, revealing a single object within the chest. It was a small, crystalline orb, glowing softly with an inner light. It pulsed in time with Aemon's heartbeat, its surface shimmering with what seemed to be the reflection of stars and galaxies. The orb was beautiful, yet dangerous. Aemon knew that this was the power he had been seeking, the very force that had drawn him to the thunderous mountain in the first place. But what would he do with it? Could he control it, or would it control him? As if in response to his thoughts, the orb began to resonate with a deep, thunderous sound, like the rumble of a storm brewing on the horizon. The temple seemed to tremble with the power contained within it, and Aemon could feel the weight of destiny pressing down upon him. It was then that he understood. The orb was not merely an object, it was a key to unlocking the ancient power of the gods, and a key to understanding the true nature of the storm that had haunted the mountain for centuries. The thunderous rumble grew louder, and the walls of the temple began to crack, the ground shaking beneath Aemon's feet. The storm was returning, more powerful than ever before. Aemon knew that he had to make a choice. Would he use the orb to control the storm, to harness the power of the gods for his own purposes? Or would he destroy it, leaving the temple's secrets buried forever, hidden from the world? With one last glance at the orb, Aemon made his decision. He turned and ran, the sound of thunder deafening in his ears as he fled the crumbling temple. The storm had returned, but this time, it was not a warning. It was a force that could not be contained. And as Aemon escaped the mountain's depths, he realized that some secrets were never meant to be uncovered. The storm would forever rage on, guarding the hidden temple and its ancient power. Aemon stumbled through the crumbling corridors of the temple, his heart racing with each step. The thunderous rumbling that filled the air was no longer just a distant sound, it was the very pulse of the mountain. An unrelenting force that threatened to tear everything apart. The stone beneath his feet shook violently as if the temple itself was rebelling against his presence. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. He had discovered the orb, but what did it mean? The power it contained was unimaginable beyond the comprehension of any mortal. And yet, Aemon had felt it, had touched its raw energy. The storm had not only been a barrier to the temple, but a warning, a reminder of the ancient forces that still ruled this place. He couldn't help but wonder if he had made the right choice. The orb was a gift, a curse, and a temptation. Would he ever have been able to control it, or would it have consumed him, as it had consumed those who had sought it before him? The storm had answered his question by returning with such fury. Aemon reached the temple's entrance just as the walls behind him began to crumble. Massive stones fell from above, crashing into the ground with deafening booms. The mountain itself seemed to protest the disturbance, its foundations shaking, as though it was trying to protect the power hidden within its depths. Breathless, Aemon raced toward the exit, the entrance growing larger with every desperate step. He could see the storm swirling above, the sky an unholy canvas of flashing lightning and twisting clouds. The wind howled like a living beast, roaring in anger, as if the very air was alive with the tempest's fury. He emerged from the darkened temple into the open air, but the world around him seemed transformed. The storm was not simply a natural phenomenon, it was an entity in itself, a force of nature that responded to his presence. The winds howled, the ground shook beneath his feet, and the sky crackled with the power of the gods themselves. But there was no time to ponder the storm's true nature. Aemon turned his back on the temple and fled, the path ahead blurry with the fierce winds and torrential rain. The mountain seemed to rise up against him, its peaks lost in the churning clouds. But he pressed on, knowing that his life, perhaps the world itself, depended on what he would do next. Days passed before Aemon found shelter from the relentless storm. He had made his way down from the mountain, leaving behind the temple and its secrets. But the storm never truly left him. It clung to him like a shadow, swirling in his thoughts, thrumming in his chest. Aemon had come to realize that the orb, the power within it, was not simply an object, but a living, breathing force. It was as if the storm itself had given him a gift, a connection to the ancient energy that had long been dormant. The storm that had once been a barrier was now part of him, just as the orb had become part of his soul. He could hear it in his mind, a voice, a whisper carried on the wind. You have touched the power of the gods, but it is not yet yours to command. The storm's voice was like the rumble of thunder, distant yet all-encompassing. Aemon knew that he had to make a choice. He could not keep running from this power, nor could he ignore the storm that followed him. It was a force of nature, one that could not be tamed or controlled by mere mortals. But there was another possibility. Perhaps the storm had come to him for a reason. Perhaps he was meant to guide it, to use it for something greater than himself. As Aemon sat alone in his small shelter, the orb glowing softly in his hands, he thought back to the teachings of the ancient texts. He had studied stories of heroes who had faced impossible odds, of those who had unlocked hidden powers and used them to shape the world. The stories often spoke of the balance between light and darkness, power and wisdom, destruction and creation. Could he be the one to restore that balance? Could he use the power of the storm to protect the world, rather than destroy it? The wind picked up outside, rattling the walls of his shelter. Aemon stood and walked to the door, his gaze rising to the sky. The storm was still there, swirling above, but it no longer seemed like a threat. It was a challenge, a test. And Aemon had made his choice. Aemon returned to the mountain, the orb still in his possession. This time, he was not afraid. He had come to understand the power that the storm represented. It was not an enemy, it was a force to be respected, a force that demanded harmony, not domination. The mountain had given him its secret, and now it was up to him to decide how to use it. The storm had once been a barrier, but now, it was a bridge between the mortal world and the divine. As Aemon made his way back to the temple, he felt a sense of peace settle within him. The thunder still rumbled in the distance, but it no longer filled him with fear. Instead, it was a reminder of the balance he now carried within himself. The ancient temple had been a place of power, but it was more than just a relic of the past. It was a place where the forces of nature and the will of the gods had come together. Where the past and present merged into a single moment of timeless possibility. Aemon approached the pedestal once more, placing the orb gently upon it. As he did, the storm outside seemed to pause, as if holding its breath. The wind calmed, the clouds parted, and a single beam of light shone down upon the temple. In that moment, Aemon understood. The storm had never been a curse, it had been a gift. And now, with the power of the storm and the wisdom he had gained, he was ready to carry that gift into the world. The hidden temple had been revealed to him, not for its secrets, but for its lesson. The power of the gods, the storm itself, could be both a force of destruction and a source of creation. It was up to him to choose how it would be used. And so, Aemon stood at the heart of the thunderous mountain, the storm now a part of him. He had unlocked the temple's secret, but more importantly, he had unlocked the power within himself. And with that power, he would walk forward, not as a conqueror, but as a guardian, ensuring that the balance of nature and the divine was maintained for generations to come. With the orb placed upon the pedestal, the temple's atmosphere shifted. It was as if the very stones of the ancient hall breathed a sigh of relief. Aemon stood in silence, his heart pounding as the power of the storm surged within him. The light from the orb intensified, casting a soft glow across the temple's sacred walls. And the whispers of the wind grew louder, as if the mountain itself was speaking to him. "You are the chosen one," the voice within the storm murmured, its tones like the rustling of leaves and the crackle of thunder. "The balance you seek is within you. You must now become the bridge between the ancient powers and the world of men." Aemon felt the weight of those words deep within his soul. The orb, this incredible source of divine power, was not just an artifact to be coveted. It was a responsibility. He had been drawn to it by destiny, not for glory, but for a higher purpose, to ensure that the storm, the very force of nature that had protected the temple for centuries, would no longer be a destructive power, but a force for balance. He could feel the storm beckoning him, not as a master would call a servant, but as a force of nature seeking its true guardian. It was not about controlling the storm, it was about understanding it, guiding it, and using its power wisely. The storm was a part of the earth, just as he was a part of it now. As he stood before the orb, Aemon's thoughts drifted to the world beyond the mountain. He knew that the power of the storm could alter the course of history. In the wrong hands, it could bring devastation beyond comprehension. But he also knew that he had been chosen to protect the storm from those who would abuse it. He was the one to keep the balance intact, to ensure the harmony between the divine forces and the world of man. The voice of the storm echoed again, but this time, it was a command. "Take the orb. You are ready." Aemon reached forward and gently grasped the orb. As soon as his fingers made contact, a surge of energy coursed through him, more intense than anything he had ever experienced. His body was overwhelmed with the power of the storm, the ancient forces that had been bound to the mountain for centuries. He could feel the electricity running through his veins, the winds whispering through his thoughts, and the rumble of thunder vibrating deep within his chest. But instead of fear, Aemon felt clarity. He understood the storm, its nature, and its purpose. It was both destructive and life-giving. It could level mountains or nourish the earth. It was neither good nor evil, it simply existed, as all things did, in balance. As the storm raged within him, he knew that his role was not to conquer it, but to guide it, to ensure that its power was used for the good of the world. With this newfound understanding, Aemon felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. The storm no longer felt like a threat, it was a part of him, a force that he could now communicate with and harness. He took a deep breath, feeling the power within him settle, like the calm before a great storm. He had been given a gift, but it was a gift that came with great responsibility. Aemon stood atop the mountain once more, the orb in his hand, its light glowing softly against the backdrop of the stormy sky. The winds had calmed, the thunder had quieted, and the clouds that had once been dark and oppressive now parted, revealing the first rays of dawn breaking through. The storm was still there, but it no longer felt hostile. It was a force of nature, and it was now at peace. Aemon felt the harmony between himself and the storm. It was a connection that could never be broken, a bond that would last for as long as he walked the earth. As he gazed out over the world below, Aemon knew that his journey was far from over. The power of the storm was a tool that could be used to protect the world, to heal it, or to destroy it, depending on the choices he made. And he understood now that those choices would not just affect him, but the world itself. He turned away from the mountain, the storm still whispering in his mind, guiding him forward. There was much to be done. The world was changing, and with the power he now held, he could help shape its future. But he would do so carefully, with wisdom, knowing that every storm, no matter how powerful, needed to be guided and understood. And so, with the orb at his side and the storm within him, Aemon descended from the thunderous mountain, not as a conqueror, but as a guardian. He would protect the secrets of the temple, but more importantly, he would protect the balance between the forces of nature and the world of man. As he journeyed into the unknown, Aemon knew that the storm would always be with him. It would never leave his side, but it would not consume him. It would be his ally, his guide, and his responsibility. And in that responsibility, Aemon found his true purpose. The thunderous mountain, the hidden temple, and the storm were no longer mere legends. They were a part of him now, and he was their guardian, forever intertwined with the power of the gods, the storm, and the balance of the world. Aemon's journey took him far from the thunderous mountain, but its presence was never far from his mind. He had seen the power of the storm and the depths of its mystery, and he understood that he now carried a burden unlike any other. The world around him had changed. He had changed on now. With the storm at his side, he was not just a man. He was a keeper of forces older than time itself, and his path was one of guardianship, balance, and wisdom. As he traveled through forests, across rivers, and over plains, Aemon felt the storm guiding him, whispering through the winds. Each time a thunderstorm rolled in from the distance, Aemon knew it wasn't simply a weather pattern, it was the call of the mountain. The pulse of the orb within him, reminding him of his mission. The storms had become his allies, and through them, he learned to understand the true depth of his responsibility. But as the storms began to follow him, whispers of his power spread. Stories of a man who could call forth lightning, whose presence could calm the fiercest of tempests, began to reach villages, kingdoms, and distant lands. Some saw him as a hero, a force of nature destined to protect the world. Others saw him as a threat, a powerful and unpredictable being who controlled the very storm. And soon, those who coveted such power began to take notice. In a distant kingdom, rumors of a man who wielded the storm reached the ears of ambitious rulers and powerful sorcerers. They believed that if they could harness Aemon's power, they could command the storm for their own purposes, be it to conquer lands, to crush enemies, or to rule the world with an iron fist. One such sorcerer, known as Malvarus, had long sought the secrets of ancient power. His obsession with the storms led him to gather a group of elite warriors, skilled in magic and battle. They were known as the Storm Chasers, and their sole purpose was to capture Aemon and claim his power. Malvarus had long known of the hidden temple, of the orb, and of the storm that now pulsed within Aemon's veins. He had spent years studying the ancient texts, learning the rituals, and seeking ways to control the forces of nature. But he had failed. The storm was too wild, too unpredictable. He had learned, however, that Aemon was not just a man, he was a conduit for the storm itself. He knew that if he could capture Aemon and force him to relinquish his connection to the storm, he could control the orb, control the power of the thunderous mountain. And with that power, he could reshape the world to his will. The storm chasers tracked Aemon across the land, their hunt relentless. Aemon could feel their presence in ever-growing darkness, closing in on him. The winds shifted, the storm clouds gathered, and he knew that it was only a matter of time before they confronted him. Aemon's path eventually brought him to a remote valley, the air thick with tension. The storm clouds had gathered above him, swirling violently, as though the heavens themselves were preparing for a battle. He knew they were near. The storm chasers were closing in, and the storm within him responded, a rising tide of energy surging through his body. He stood at the edge of a cliff, the valley stretching out before him. The winds howled, and the ground trembled as a group of armored figures appeared on the horizon. Malvarus, flanked by his storm chasers, emerged from the mist. His eyes gleamed with hunger as he looked upon Aemon, the one who held the storm. "So, you are the one who wields the power of the storm," Malvarus said, his voice cold and calculating. "You've done well to evade us, but your journey ends here." Aemon faced him, his grip tightening around the orb. "The storm is not for you to control," he said firmly. "It is not a weapon, not a tool for conquest. It is a force of nature, a balance that must be respected." Malvarus laughed, his voice echoing across the valley. "You speak of balance, but you are nothing but a puppet of the storm. You cannot understand its true potential. I will master it, and with it, I will rule all." Without warning, Malvarus raised his hands, and the storm above erupted in a violent roar. Lightning cracked through the sky, and winds howled with fury. The storm chasers advanced, their magic crackling with power, ready to strike. Aemon closed his eyes, feeling the storm within him respond. It was not a weapon to be used in anger, but a force that needed to be calmed, to be guided. He extended his hand, calling forth the storm not to fight, but to understand. The air around him crackled with energy as the storm raged. Aemon reached deep into his connection with the storm, guiding it, soothing it. The winds began to settle, the lightning lessened, and the thunder became a distant rumble. The storm, once a chaotic and destructive force, began to respond to him, to his will not as a conqueror, but as its guardian. Malvarus's face twisted in disbelief. "No, you cannot control it." But Aemon's voice was calm. "I do not seek to control it. I seek only to guide it." With a single gesture, Aemon summoned a powerful gust of wind, knocking the storm chasers back. The ground trembled as the storm shifted, the clouds parting, leaving only a calm, clear sky. Malvarus, his face red with fury, charged at Aemon, but the storm, now a peaceful force, held him back. Aemon lowered his hand, and the storm's energy dissipated, leaving behind a profound silence. Malvarus fell to his knees, defeated, the power of the storm no longer under his control. Aemon stood over Malvarus, the orb glowing softly in his hand. He could feel the storm pulsing within him, but now, there was no anger, no fear, only understanding. He had learned to embrace the storm, to guide it, not as a weapon, but as a force of nature that could bring both destruction and creation. "You sought to control the storm," Aemon said, his voice gentle but firm. "But the storm is not for us to control. It is a part of the world, just as we are. We must learn to live with it, to understand it, and to protect the balance." Malvarus, defeated and humbled, bowed his head in surrender. Aemon turned away, the storm now a calm companion. He had fought the battle, but the true test had always been his ability to guide the storm within him, and to protect the balance between the forces of nature and the world of men. As he walked away, the storm followed, a silent guardian of the earth. And so, the journey of the storm's guardian continued, a path not of power, but of responsibility, wisdom, and harmony. Despite the victory over Malvarus and his storm chasers, Aemon knew that his journey was far from over. The power of the storm was a responsibility, and it was clear that others would seek to exploit it. The world around him was changing, and the forces of darkness, sensing the balance that had shifted, would not remain idle for long. As Aemon traveled further from the valley, he felt the weight of his duty pressing down on him. The storm inside him whispered warnings, its voice now more urgent. There were dark forces stirring in the corners of the world, forces that sought to upset the balance he had worked so hard to protect. One evening, as he rested near a river, a figure appeared before him, shrouded in a cloak of shadows. Eamon stood at once, his senses alert. The figure's presence was unnerving, as though the air itself grew colder in its wake. "You are the guardian of the storm," the figure said, its voice low and distant, as if carried on the wind itself. "You have failed to understand the true cost of your power. The storm is not just a force of nature, it is a herald of a greater darkness." Eamon narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady. "And what do you mean by greater darkness?" The figure stepped forward, revealing only glowing eyes from beneath the hood. "I am one who has watched the balance for eons. The storm is not just a protector. It is a signal, a warning of things to come. The world is on the brink of a new age, a dark age, one where the forces of light and shadow will clash in ways you cannot imagine." Eamon took a deep breath, his hand resting on the orb at his side. He felt the storm stir within him, responding to the figure's words. "You speak of a coming darkness, but I have already stopped one who sought to control the storm. If there is another, I will stop them as well." The figure's eyes glowed brighter. "It is not a matter of stopping them, Guardian. It is a matter of understanding that the storm, the power you wield, is not just a tool, it is the key to the balance between worlds. If you do not learn to master it completely, the forces that seek to unbalance the world will tear it apart." Eamon felt a chill run down his spine. He had always thought that the storm was something he could control, but the figure's words planted a seed of doubt in his mind. The storm was not simply a force to be mastered. It was part of something far greater, something that stretched beyond the physical world and into the realms of light and darkness. "You must learn to control the storm's true nature, Guardian," the figure continued. "You must understand the ancient forces that bind the storm to the earth. Only then will you be able to prevent the coming chaos." Before Eamon could respond, the figure turned, fading into the night like a shadow dissipating in the wind. And with that, the storm quieted, as though waiting for Eamon to make his decision. Eamon spent many days contemplating the cryptic words of the shadowy figure. He had never believed that the storm was just a simple element to be wielded. But now, he felt the weight of its true significance. There was something far deeper at play, a connection between the storm and ancient forces that he had yet to comprehend. His journey took him across many lands, through dense forests and barren deserts, all the while following the whispers of the storm. His path eventually led him to a remote mountain range, its peaks hidden behind a veil of mist. The storm within him grew restless, its energy surging in waves, as if it recognized something here. Deep within the mountains, Eamon found a hidden valley, and there, nestled between towering cliffs, stood the forgotten temple. It was an ancient structure, older than the thunderous mountain itself. The temple's stones were worn with age, covered in vines and moss, but it radiated an ancient power, one that seemed to call to him. As he stepped into the temple, Eamon felt an overwhelming presence. The storm inside him responded, a deep, resonating hum that vibrated through the very ground beneath him. The walls were covered with intricate carvings and symbols that matched the ones he had seen in the hidden temple of the thunderous mountain. At the center of the temple stood a large altar, atop which rested another orb. This orb was different, its surface dark and turbulent, as though it contained a storm of its own, a storm of shadows. Eamon approached it cautiously, sensing the immense power it held. He placed his hand upon it, and in that instant, the orb pulsed with energy, sending a shockwave through the temple. The storm within him responded violently, and for the first time, Eamon felt a deep fear. This was not a storm to be guided, it was something far more dangerous, something that had been locked away for a reason. The voice of the storm spoke to him, more urgently than ever before. You are the guardian. You must not let the shadow consume you. It is not the storm you know, it is the storm's opposite, the darkness that threatens all that you've sworn to protect. Suddenly, the temple trembled, and the air grew thick with a malevolent presence. Aemon realized that the darkness was not just an external force, it was within the very storm he had come to understand. This was the true nature of the storm, the force that had been locked away for centuries. And now, it was free. The dark orb began to crack, and from within, a shadowy figure emerged. It was a being of pure darkness, its form constantly shifting, like smoke in the wind. Its eyes glowed with an unearthly light, and its voice was like the distant rumble of thunder. You are too late, Guardian, it said, its voice echoing through the temple. The storm belongs to me now. And with it, I will bring the world to its knees. Aemon stepped back, his hand still on the orb. He could feel the storm within him reacting violently, as though it was torn between the forces of light and darkness. The balance was shifting, and if he did not act quickly, the storm would be consumed by the darkness. But Aemon knew now that the storm was not just a tool of destruction or creation, it was a force of balance. It was his responsibility to protect that balance, to ensure that neither light nor darkness overtook the other. With a deep breath, Aemon called upon the power of the storm, not to fight, but to harmonize. He reached out with his mind and soul, feeling the presence of both the storm and the shadow. He understood now that the storm was not just a single force, it was the embodiment of all forces, both light and dark, life and death, creation and destruction. The storm responded, its energy shifting, adapting to the call. Aemon summoned the light of the storm, but he also embraced the shadow, guiding it, not as an enemy, but as a necessary part of the balance. The two forces collided in a brilliant flash of energy, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The darkness screamed, and the storm roared, but Aemon held firm, channeling the forces within him, merging the storm with the shadow. And then, with a final burst of energy, the two forces merged into a single, harmonious power. The shadow dissipated, leaving behind a calm, serene storm, a storm of balance, a storm that would no longer destroy, but protect. The forgotten temple fell silent, and the orb at the altar dimmed, its power now stabilized. Aemon stood alone, his connection to the storm stronger than ever before. He had learned the true nature of the storm, and in doing so, had secured the balance between light and darkness, life and death. With the storm now under his control, Aemon left the forgotten temple and continued his journey. He had become more than just a man, he was a guardian of the storm, a protector of the balance between the forces of light and darkness. And though his path would not be easy, he knew that he had found his true purpose. As he walked into the horizon, the storm followed, not as a force of destruction, but as a companion. A guide, and a reminder of the responsibility he had taken upon himself. And so, the Guardian's journey continued, a journey not of power, but of balance. Aemon had thought that with the storm under his control, his role as Guardian would finally bring peace. But even as he walked under the vast sky, he could feel the weight of his responsibility pressing heavier upon him with each passing day. The balance between light and darkness, which he had fought so fiercely to protect, was delicate, fragile, even. As he crossed plains and mountains, he came upon towns and villages, all of them touched by the lingering effects of the storm's chaos. The storm had brought both hope and ruin to the land, and its power, though now tamed, still left echoes in the hearts of those it had ravaged. While some saw him as a hero, others feared the very force he had embraced. It was not just the storm that people feared now, but the power he wielded, and the uncertainty it brought. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with streaks of crimson. Eamon came across a quiet village nestled beside a vast, calm lake. There, he met an elderly woman who seemed to recognize him immediately. Her eyes, though clouded with age, held a knowing gleam. "You are the guardian of the storm," she said, her voice soft yet firm. "But do you truly understand what it means to wield such power?" Eamon paused. The question, though simple, struck deep within him. He had embraced the storm, but had he truly understood its depths? Had he truly grasped the responsibility it carried, not just for the world, but for the very fabric of existence itself? The woman continued, her gaze steady on him. "The storm was never meant to be controlled by a single person. It is a force that binds all worlds, light and shadow, life and death. There are those who seek to use it to disrupt the balance, to break it entirely." Eamon frowned. "I have already fought to protect it from those who sought to control it. Malvarus, the shadow at the forgotten temple." The woman raised a hand, silencing him. "You misunderstand. There is another who has learned to bend the storm to his will. He is not like Malvarus, nor the darkness of the forgotten temple. He is something else entirely, a force that seeks to fracture the balance and cast the world into eternal chaos." Eamon felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Who is he?" "The one who calls himself the Stormbringer," she whispered. "He is a being of shadow, but not in the way you think. He was once a guardian like you, long before your time. But he failed to understand the storm's true nature, and in doing so, he lost himself. He now seeks to remake the world in his Imagian image where only chaos reigns." Eamon's heart clenched. He had not anticipated another guardian, someone who shared his connection to the storm, yet used it for destruction. This new enemy, the Stormbringer, was more than just a threat. He was a reflection of the dangers Eamon himself had nearly succumbed to, the temptation to control, rather than balance. The woman continued, "The Stormbringer has already begun his work. He has shattered the seals that once kept the storm's darkest powers in check. If you do not stop him, he will tear apart the very fabric of the world, and the storm will become nothing more than a harbinger of the end." Eamon's resolve hardened. "I will stop him. I must." But the woman's eyes softened. "Be cautious, guardian. The Stormbringer is not easily defeated. He knows the storm as you do and more. To face him, you must confront not just the storm, but the shadow within yourself. Only then will you have the strength to stop him." With the knowledge of the Stormbringer's existence weighing on him, Eamon set out immediately, following the trail of destruction left in his wake. The storm within him stirred restlessly, a constant reminder of the power he wielded and the danger it posed if misused. Days turned into weeks, and the landscape changed as he ventured deeper into uncharted lands. The air grew thick with an unnatural stillness, as though the very winds held their breath in fear. Eamon knew that the further he went, the closer he came to the heart of the storm and the Stormbringer himself. One night, as Eamon camped beneath the stars, the storm inside him flared, its energy surging uncontrollably. He could feel the pull of the Stormbringer's presence, drawing closer. The very fabric of reality seemed to tremble under the weight of the impending confrontation. Suddenly, the sky above him cracked open with a deafening roar, and a figure descended from the clouds, dark and imposing, with eyes that glowed like twin orbs of fire. The Stormbringer had arrived. "I have been waiting for you, guardian," the Stormbringer's voice boomed, like thunder reverberating in the distance. "You think you can stop me? You who are so fragile, so limited. You cannot control the storm. It controls you. And now, I will show you the true power of chaos." Eamon stood tall, his heart pounding, the storm within him swirling, responding to the challenge. "I won't let you destroy what I've sworn to protect." The balance will not fall. The Stormbringer laughed, a sound that echoed across the land like the roar of a tempest. Balance? There is no balance, Guardian. There is only power, and I will have it. With a wave of his hand, the Stormbringer summoned a violent torrent of dark winds and crackling lightning. The sky darkened, and the very earth seemed to quake beneath the onslaught. But Aemon, remembering the woman's words, stood firm. He reached deep within, drawing on the power of the storm, but this time, he did not try to control it. He embraced it, allowed it to flow through him, harmonizing the light and the shadow. The storm was not an enemy to be conquered, it was a force of nature, one that could be balanced, guided. The two storms collided in a fury of light and shadow, thunder and silence, as the earth trembled beneath their clash. Aemon could feel the storm inside him pushing back against the darkness, a battle not just between two forces, but within himself. The Stormbringer's power was immense, but Aemon's resolve was unyielding. He had learned that to wield the storm was not to control it was to understand it, to become one with it. And in that moment, he knew that only through balance could he hope to defeat the Stormbringer. With a final surge of energy, Aemon summoned the full might of the storm within him, channeling its power into a single, blinding strike. The force of the storm shattered the Stormbringer's dark magic, and with a final cry, the figure was consumed by the very darkness he had sought to wield. The sky cleared, the winds calmed, and the storm within Aemon settled into a peaceful silence. Aemon stood alone in the aftermath, the landscape scarred by the battle, but the storm, at last, was at rest. The Stormbringer had been defeated, but Aemon knew that this victory had come at a great cost. The storm had been balanced, but the world had been irrevocably changed. Aemon had not just protected the storm, but he had come to understand its true nature. It was not a force to be feared or controlled, it was a force to be respected, a reminder of the balance between all things. As the sun rose over the horizon, Aemon felt the weight of his responsibility settle upon him once more. The storm would always be a part of him, but now, he understood how to guide it, to protect the balance of the world. And so, Aemon, guardian of the storm, walked into the dawn, knowing that his journey was far from over. But for the first time, he was at peace, not just with the storm, but with himself. Aemon stood at the edge of the shattered battlefield, the remnants of the Stormbringer's dark magic still swirling like wisps of smoke in the wind. The land was quiet now, but Aemon could feel the deep, unspoken tension in the air. The battle had been won, but something about the aftermath felt incomplete. The storm that had once raged within him had calmed, but the world, he realized, was still changing. The skies, the winds, the very earth beneath his feet, everything was in a state of flux. The storm had been subdued, but its essence had not vanished. It lingered, waiting. His journey had taught him that the storm was not just a force, it was a living, breathing entity, a primal energy that connected everything. Its fury, its calm, its power, these were reflections of the world itself, ever in motion, ever shifting. He could not just defeat it and walk away. It was his responsibility, as guardian, to ensure that the storm's power did not go unchecked. Aemon gazed toward the horizon, his heart heavy with the realization that his battle was far from over. Though he had vanquished the Stormbringer, there were still whispers of a deeper truth. One that the storm had revealed to him, but which he had yet to fully understand. The storm, he now knew, was tied to something far older, something that had been lost to time. "Guardian, you have done well," a voice spoke softly behind him. Aemon turned to see a figure standing in the distance, their face obscured by a hooded cloak. They appeared almost ethereal, as if they were a part of the land itself. The figure stepped forward, their eyes glowing faintly with an inner light. Who are you? Eamon asked, his voice steady but tinged with suspicion. I am Aurelia, the figure said, her voice soft yet full of authority. I have watched over the storm for centuries, longer than even the oldest of the ancient guardians. I am its keeper. Eamon felt a chill run through him at the mention of the keeper. You have been keeping watch over the storm all this time? Aurelia nodded. Yes. The storm is not merely a force of nature. It is an ancient power, older than the world itself. It was created to maintain the balance between realms, to ensure that no single world grows too powerful or too weak. But over time, it has become something more, something dangerous. The Stormbringer sought to control it, to warp it to his will. But you, Guardian, have done something rare. You did not try to control it. You sought to understand it. And in doing so, you have uncovered something even the Stormbringer did not know. Eamon frowned. What do you mean? What have I uncovered? Aurelia's eyes grew somber. The storm is tied to something much older, something hidden beneath the surface of the world. It is not just a storm. It is the key to the forgotten realms, places where time and space bend, where the fabric of reality itself is malleable. And now that you have awakened it, you must venture deeper. The storm has stirred, and it will not rest until its full power is realized. Eamon felt the weight of her words pressing down on him. The storm was not just a force of nature, but a key to something far greater. And if left unchecked, its power could unravel the very fabric of existence. I cannot do this alone, Eamon said, his voice filled with resolve. If there are forgotten realms hidden beneath the world, I will need guidance, and I will need allies. Aurelia smiled faintly, a knowing look in her eyes. You will not be alone. There are others who have been chosen to stand alongside you. But first, you must journey to the heart of the storm where it all began. The path will not be easy, and the dangers you will face are unlike anything you have encountered before. With that, Aurelia raised her hand, and the ground beneath them trembled. A glowing path appeared in the distance, a winding trail that led into the heart of a distant mountain range. The very place where the storm's power had originated. The storm has called you, Guardian, Aurelia said. Follow the path, and you will find the answers you seek. But remember, the storm does not give up its secrets easily. You must be prepared to face the darkness within, and to challenge the very essence of what you have become. Eamon nodded, his determination clear. The storm had not been defeated, it had only revealed a deeper mystery. And he would uncover it, no matter the cost. Eamon set out the next morning, his steps steady as he followed the glowing path. The air grew colder, and the landscape shifted as he ventured deeper into the mountains. The winds grew fiercer, howling through the jagged peaks, but Eamon remained undeterred. The storm was always with him, its presence a constant hum beneath his skin. As he ascended the mountains, Eamon encountered strange and wondrous sights: hidden caves filled with ancient murals depicting the storm's creation. Towering statues of long-forgotten guardians who had once protected the realms. He realized that the storm had always been a part of a much larger tapestry, one that connected the past, present, and future. But even as he marveled at the beauty of the ruins, a sense of foreboding lingered. The storm had not yet revealed its full power, and Eamon knew that the deeper he traveled, the more dangerous the path would become. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Eamon arrived at the entrance to a vast cavern, the very heart of the storm. The air here was thick with electricity, and the ground beneath him pulsed with an ancient energy. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, knowing that he was about to face the storm in its truest form. Inside the cavern, a swirling vortex of wind and lightning awaited him. It was the very embodiment of the storm, vast, untamable, and wild. But Eamon could also feel something else within Ida's presence, watching him, waiting. You have come, a voice echoed from within the storm. It was deep and resonant, as if coming from the storm itself. I have come to understand you, Aemon replied, his voice steady. I have come to find the truth. The storm raged around him, but this time, Aemon did not flinch. He closed his eyes and let the storm wash over him, feeling its power surge through his veins. He had always feared it, but now, he understood it. It was not a force to be controlled, it was a part of him, and he was a part of it. With that understanding, the storm began to calm. The wind slowed, the lightning faded, and the swirling vortex dissipated. And in its place, Aemon saw a vision, a glimpse of what lay ahead. A realm beyond the veil of reality, a place where the boundaries between worlds were thin, and where the forgotten realms lay hidden. The storm had shown him the way. Now, it was time for Aemon to step into the unknown and uncover the truth that had been buried for so long. The storm had calmed, its thunderous voice now a mere whisper in the air. Aemon stood at the center of the cavern, feeling the pulse of energy reverberate through his body. The vision had faded, leaving him with only the faintest remnants of its meaning. But in the depths of his heart, he knew his path was clear. He stepped forward, the walls of the cavern stretching upwards, seemingly endless. As he walked, the cavern walls began to change, shifting from rough stone to smooth surfaces covered in strange symbols and glyphs. It was as if the very mountain was alive, responding to his presence, guiding him deeper into its core. The further he ventured, the more the air became thick with a strange, otherworldly energy. It was as if the space itself was bending, stretching between realms. The storm was not just a force of nature, it was a bridge, a gateway between worlds. Aemon could feel it now, the very fabric of reality trembling under his feet. He came to a large chamber, the heart of the storm, and saw before him an ancient, towering structure made of obsidian stone. Its surface etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift as he approached. At the center of this structure was a massive, swirling vortex, the eye of the storm, where the winds twisted and roared, yet there was no sound. Only a deep hum filled the air, a resonance that vibrated in the core of his being. This is it, Aemon whispered to himself. The gateway. He could feel the storm's power swirling around him, and he knew this was where the true test would begin. The storm had shown him the way, but now it was up to him to pass through the veil and into the forgotten realms beyond. As he stepped closer to the vortex, the storm spoke to him once more, its voice now gentle but filled with an ancient wisdom. You seek the truth, guardian, it said, its voice a ripple in the wind. But the truth comes at a cost. To pass through the veil is to leave behind the familiar and venture into the unknown. Do you accept this path? Aemon hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The storm was right. The unknown was filled with dangers he could not yet comprehend. But he had already come so far, and the answers he sought were beyond the veil. There was no turning back now. I accept, Aemon said, his voice steady and filled with resolve. I will face whatever lies beyond. The storm swirled around him, its winds rising once more, but now they felt different, welcoming, guiding. With a final deep breath, Aemon stepped into the vortex. The world around Aemon seemed to twist and warp as he passed through the vortex. Colors blurred, and sounds became distorted. He felt as though he was falling through the very fabric of reality, tumbling through layers of existence. His body felt weightless, suspended between time and space. And then, with a sudden jolt, everything stopped. Aemon landed softly on the ground, though he wasn't sure what he had landed on. The landscape before him was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a realm of perpetual twilight, where the sky above shimmered with an ethereal glow, and the ground beneath him was covered in soft, glowing moss. In the distance, towering structures seemed to rise from the earth, their spires reaching toward the sky like ancient guardians, their surfaces adorned with symbols he could not decipher. The air was still, yet full of energy. It hummed with a strange vibration, as if the very air was alive. Eamon could feel it stirring within him, the storm's presence still echoing in his mind, urging him forward. As he took his first steps into this new world, he noticed movement at the edges of his vision. Figures were watching him from the shadows, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. He could feel their gaze, but they made no move to approach. Instead, they waited, as though observing his every action. Eamon continued onward, his senses heightened, every step bringing him closer to the heart of this forgotten realm. The deeper he ventured, the more he could feel the weight of the storm's power in this place. It was a force, but it was also something else, an ancient presence, waiting to be discovered. As he neared the center of the realm, a large stone archway appeared before him, its surface etched with the same shifting symbols he had seen in the cavern. The air around it seemed to ripple, and Eamon could feel a pulse of energy emanating from the archway. It was calling to him, as if inviting him to step through and into the unknown. "This is it," Eamon whispered to himself, knowing that beyond this archway lay the answers he sought. He stepped forward, crossing the threshold, and instantly, the world around him changed. The moment Eamon passed through the archway, he found himself standing in the heart of an ancient temple. The air was thick with the scent of old stone and moss, and the sound of distant, echoing footsteps filled the air. The temple was vast, its ceilings towering above him, adorned with carvings of long-forgotten gods and creatures. The walls were lined with intricate tapestries, depicting scenes of battles, ancient rituals, and strange celestial events. At the center of the temple was a massive altar, carved from a single block of obsidian. On it lay an artifact, glowing faintly with an inner light. Eamon felt the pull of the artifact, an irresistible urge to approach. As he stepped closer, the storm's voice echoed in his mind once more. "The storm has brought you here, Guardian. You have crossed the veil to the place where the realms converge. The artifact before you is the key. It holds the power to unlock the forgotten knowledge of the Ancient Ones. But be warned, what you seek may not be what you expect." Eamon reached out, his fingers brushing the surface of the artifact. The moment he touched it, a surge of energy coursed through him, filling his mind with visions of ancient worlds, lost civilizations, and forgotten gods. He saw the creation of the storm, its purpose, and the power it held to shape the fabric of existence itself. The artifact was more than just a key, it was a conduit to the knowledge of the ancients, a way to tap into the very essence of the universe. And with that knowledge came a great responsibility. Eamon realized that the storm, the force he had come to understand and wield, was part of something much greater, something that spanned beyond time and space. He closed his eyes, allowing the visions to wash over him, and understood at last that his journey was not just to protect the storm. It was to understand the balance between all things, to ensure that the forgotten realms remained in harmony, and to wield the power of the storm wisely. The storm had brought him here, but it was now up to him to choose what to do with the knowledge he had uncovered. That's the end of today's story. See you.